James Marshall, thank you very much for joining today. Before I go into anything that we're going to talk about, do you want to just give an introduction to who you are, what you do, where you work?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, so
easy.
I'm James Marshall. I'm a partner solution architect at Microsoft, and I work with Microsoft's partner ecosystem on building cool stuff with our technology, basically.
Cool stuff with AI, Copilot, all that fun stuff. AI is the conversation that everyone is having at the moment. Obviously, every conversation you have, someone's bringing in AI, technology's bringing in AI. It's the buzzword, isn't it, really? But I think one of the areas that we're seeing a lot of businesses use at the moment is Copilot, hence the logo on the shirt. And I was like, who better to speak about than Copilot man himself? So as everyone's talking about AI at the moment, I think a lot of the conversations that we're having is people go, yeah, we've rolled out Copilot, we've rolled out Microsoft, we're an AI-ready business. But it's like, how are you using it? And you find a lot of people are just using it for, almost like an advanced Google search. They're not really pushing it to the limits. They're not giving it a go, really trying. I think it's just interesting to explore how you're seeing from the Microsoft perspective how people are using it and where people are getting those wins. Yeah. So I think to start off, how do you think where have you seen successes and how are people using it where it's beyond just that basic usage?
Yeah, look, I think there's a kind of a 3 horizon journey, if you like, that people go on. So I think most people start with that kind of, I'm just going to ask it questions like I've always asked search engines for the last 25 years, because that's kind of the mode that I know. So I've got this new tool, that's where I'm going to start. And then maybe they get kind of better at prompting. Maybe they know how to bring in a document to reference or something like that. They can attach a tool for their assistant to go and kind of do something. But then as they get sort of into more comfort, more maturity, then they move into actually how do I go from assistant to kind of agent, which is like, chatbot with a tool that can sort of start to do things on your behalf. And then they start to think about, what are the personal productivity gains I can get from that? So like, how can I get an agent to take care of my diary management or summarizing calls and putting it into my notes or whatever it might be. And then over time, they look at like, what's the multi-agent orchestration? So like, how do I start getting agents acting with each other and like autonomously? So taking entire business processes and then re-engineering them for agents so that these agents are not just working on the behalf of me, but actually they are entities within the organization, and I sort of manage them, and they're executing complex processes, autonomously. And I think everyone sort of starts off at step 1, which is I've turned on Copilot, I'm going to start asking it questions. And if they pay for it, obviously they can then connect that to their company data, and start to reason across the knowledge, the graph that they have within their business. But yeah, I think it's that curve people go on. And different companies will be at different stages of that, right? Like what I tend to see is organizations where you'll have like intrapreneurs, if you like people who are sort of quite handy with technology, quite curious. They've had the license activated, they've had the feature turned on, they've delved into Copilot Studio, and they're just really curious, kind of citizen developer type people who are like, what would happen if I connected this to this and did this? And you start to see a groundswell of agents sort of pop up within an organization. And often it's people trying to solve the same problem, and there's a bit of kind of governance. You got to sit back and be like, hey guys, you're all solving the same problem. Like, how do we come up with the right solution one time for the organization? So there's a bit of work to do there. But yeah, it's interesting to see the explosion of it in general, but then actually where it makes a difference for people day to day. And I think those are the scenarios that stick. And if that's only a subset of what gets created, then that's still adding value.
Because I think we're definitely in that stage now where it's really still quite embryonic. Everyone's testing it, and it is those people. I think you can do these like formal courses and learning and workshops, which are helpful because someone might plant a seed. But I do find the people that are getting the most out of it are those testers or those entrepreneurs that you say that are just curious. Oh, I've been asking it questions for a couple of months now. Hold on, someone mentioned Copilot Studio. Let's see if I can connect something. Like even just simple things. The other day I made one where an agent on Copilot was just literally a Teams chat, and it was like every day can you just give me a summary of like latest news, latest infrastructure deals that are based on our business?
Yeah.
Pops up and it's just like, bang, there you go. Summarize some news articles. And even that is I can just jump on a call now. I've just read it in the morning, 2 minutes whilst I'm having my coffee.
Yeah.
And I've just pushed myself forward and learnt something new. And I think that is really where people get the most out of it, is people who are really just testing it themselves and learning, because it is a new type of technology. People need to test, break it, fix it, work it out.
It's a different. I would say, for the last 20 odd years, it's probably the newest mode of working compared to any other technology that's landed, and that requires, just like people had to learn how to use search engines back in the day, now they're having to learn how to use AI effectively, so that going from simple query to actually how does this help me do my work better. I think the important thing, which it's not always the most attractive part of the journey, is figuring out how you measure the impact of this stuff. You think about an organization, there'll be personal productivity things that matter to an individual. There'll be sort of team or department level things that matter to a small group of people. And then there's the big, lofty kind of organizational level goals, right? And if you're going to invest in AI, you've got to understand what's the unit of value at each of those levels of the business, right? Like, how will you know if a person is more productive? You might say, well, that's measured by their ability to more rapidly follow up on sales calls, or qualify pipeline to a greater velocity or something.
Yeah.
At a team or department level, it might be how you can onboard employees more quickly, or be able to triage support tickets, whatever it might be. And at an organizational level, it might be things like how you're reducing cost for outside legal counsel, for example, by using AI to more agilely respond to different HR queries, or whatever it might be. Like, once you understand those sort of points of measurement at different layers of the business, then you can sort of measure them over time, and then that's how you know if AI is making a difference. Because if you can say, well, actually, this measure was at X before we did this, 6 months later it's now at Y, we can infer that AI is improved. Maybe it's like, as I say, faster call resolution, or greater turnover, or whatever.
It's coming up with those proper quantifiable success metrics. That's true, because you hear some companies that roll out Copilot to even like 20, 30,000 people, but they have no idea if it was actually that useful. Probably because they haven't set, right, we need to reduce cost here, save time here by X amount. Yeah. So coming up with those success metrics is, really. And I suppose that's with any investment, really, but especially in something when it comes to productivity, which is actually quite a hard thing to measure if you're not just going on sales figures or revenue. If you've got to find something a bit more obscure, then I think that's a really good point, is exploring those success metrics, because they can be big investments as well. So a lot of companies now, well, I'd say it's obviously big Microsoft. They're big Microsoft house, say Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. Copilot really brings them all together. Mm-hmm. And how do you see that working? Are people using it really well are they using it enough to really combine them all together? Or is it still they tend to use it at a really low level still? Or is it, that was a pretty poorly worded question.
No, I get
see what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're asking, right? And I think, look, the technology is on a rapid evolution curve. Like, it feels like every day, every month, there's new capability landing in the industry, and then even as Microsoft, we're pushing out new capabilities. We just landed Copilot Co-work, for example, and things like this are coming thick and fast. So I don't think it's fair to say anyone is using everything fully, because it's constantly moving. But I think what people are realizing is that there's more that can be done than simply just asking, hey, draft this email for me. And actually, as they start to see Copilot show up in more places, and they get, as I say, they go on that sort of maturity journey, they understand how to sort of prompt better, how to think about breaking down tasks in a slightly different way, ask questions, more outcome focused, then they see more value from their agents. And so whether that's showing up in Word, helping, track changes within a document and putting in contextual relevant comments, or whether it's managing your inbox, and triaging it with a message to you at the start of the day to tell you, these are all the meetings you need to prep for. Or whether it's, as I say, using custom agents to orchestrate business processes autonomously. Like,
Yeah.
if I think back to what we could do even just 6 months ago or 2 years ago to where we are today, and wind that forward to where we'll be a year from now, like, it is crazy to see this pace of innovation.
Yeah, it is moving so fast. And I do think it's interesting because there is this fear as well around people going, it's going to take my job, it's going to lose my job. But I'm interested to see if you agree with this. But I think we spend, it's that 20-80 rule, isn't it? 20% of our time probably gets 80% of our output. The other 80% of our time spent doing a lot of these repetitive, tedious tasks that might not be our main skill set. So I've literally just got to do a load of admin work. I know once I've had this call, I've got to fill in XYZ. That takes 20 minutes. Then I've just fried my brain after an hour call, 20-minute fill out. I think it shouldn't be this fear that everyone's going to lose their jobs. It's just going to replace you entirely. We can now do significantly more as individuals. And I think instead of it's actually just allowing us to have more capacity to do more business. So we'll just end up hiring more people to do that because they can more output and there's more demand for it, more supply. Where do you see that fear from people and they're losing their jobs to it? Or is it something we should embrace and push and use to get better ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any disruptive sort of cycle, industrial revolution type sort of thing, there's always this fear of new things displacing the way we've always done things. And I think if you look back over the history of mankind, right, I think there have been times when, for sure, certain industries have been disrupted, certain roles have been disrupted. But then off the back of all of those things, new industries have been created, new roles have been created. You know, when I joined Microsoft, the roles that exist today didn't exist then.
Yeah.
You know, cloud was in its infancy, and the thought of being a cloud solution architect, not
wasn't a thing.
Now, very much a thing. I can't tell you what roles there'll be in 5, 10, 20 years from now, but you know that they haven't been invented yet. The world of work that my daughters are going to grow up and go into is going to look immeasurably different to the one that I came into. And so when I think about the fear factor, I think, well, the thing we should be afraid of isn't, I think, that AI is going to replace our jobs. It's that the people that backfill roles are going to be the ones with AI skills that are as native to them as you and I would use Word or Outlook. And so it's not about saying, how do we trim the workforce or how do we put people out of work? It's about saying, actually, when I'm going forward, how essential is it that there's good AI literacy to help people focus on the work that's really important? Like you said, there's a lot of repetitive, low-level task work that people get, bogged down in. Actually, if agents can augment somebody's capability to allow them to focus on the things that really matter, it's not then about saying to that person, right, you must now do 10 times more work, but it's about saying, hey, as the human in the loop, how do you do more quality work? How do you spend more time with your patients? Not how do you see more patients, but how do you spend more time with the patients that you do see because you're no longer tied up doing administrative work? Or if you're in, defense, how do you spend more time protecting people than, doing admin tasks because you have to ferry spreadsheets and documents around because you're working with archaic systems? You can imagine in every sort of sector or industry, there are things that if we could just take away that pain from the working day, they could spend more time on the more interesting, more valuable part of what they do, right? So, yeah, my personal view is I'm not worried necessarily, but hey, there are bigger impacts to consider as well, right? Around what people do to add value in society.
Well, none of us have that crystal ball of what's going to happen, really. But I think there is also a really interesting opportunity on the fact that it's going to be able to give people their dreams back to some degree. Because say you set up a coffee shop, your dreams will always be to have a coffee shop. You set it up. Probably the person who set that up spends 90% of their time in that back office, filling in things, doing orders, instead of actually just making the coffee that they love to do.
Yep.
Whereas as opposed to they've had to hire someone on a part-time wage who probably doesn't care that much about coffee. They just needed a job. 18-year-olds, I need a job. That's what I do. So being able to automate and manage those back-end tasks is actually going to allow people to go and do the jobs that they want to do again. And I think that's interesting. And also the fact that if you have an idea for a business, you are now empowered and can do it a lot faster than you could before. So I think it's going to be interesting that we're probably going to potentially see this economy where people are going to go into setting up their own businesses more, those 2-3 man bands, instead of having to go into the big corporate ladder. I work with 20,000 people because it's like I can actually do a lot of these things myself now without having to hire this person, hire that person.
Yeah.
So I think it's ideas are going to come to reality a lot faster, which will also open up more businesses.
That's the exciting bit for me. The gap between the idea and the execution has gone from, in some cases, impossible to now I can do this over a coffee at my laptop in minutes. And that's exciting because actually there are people who have got innate creativity within them. They can see solutions to problems, but they're not artists, developers, they're not engineers, but they can see what they need to do. And historically, if they wanted to try and tackle the idea that they either had to find money to engage people to do that, or they had to learn the skill, which would take time. And, it might take them weeks, months, years, if ever. Whereas now they can sit down and plan with AI, work through and ideate the concept of what they're trying to build, and come up with ideas. And indeed, if it's code, then actually unleash coding agents to help them go and rapidly prototype ideas and bring that together. And our business leader now can ideate and produce an outcome in moments. An engineer can get across all business contexts because they have access to all of this data, and then add value to way more people within an organization because they can now access things that they couldn't have done before. And it's that tightening of the gap that I find super exciting. Don't get me wrong, there's a flip side of that, which is you've got lots of people creating things now. And obviously, when you create anything, particularly in an enterprise environment, you've got to make sure that it's secure and accessible and sustainable and manageable and all of those sorts of things. So it's not about filling your enterprise software catalog with loads of vibe coded stuff done over a lunch hour. But actually, if you can see a business problem, or like you say, if you're an entrepreneur who's like, I can see a gap in the market to do something, you're probably more likely to be able to go after it now because you can get much, much further, much, much faster. Before then, you need to go and bring in expertise and invest. So that kind of that flexibility I find like super cool.
Yeah, because I think people get motivated by seeing that result quite quickly sometimes, especially in like today's age. So if you can build a prototype or an idea that you've been in the shower and you've just had an idea, sometimes you're like, oh, that's going to solve that problem at work. You go, I'll just jump on Cursor and put something in. You've built a prototype. It might not be fully functional. You can't put it to production. It might not be secure, but you've looked at it and gone, my idea is sitting on the screen right now. Instead of me having to go over to development team, go, can you build this? It takes them 2 months. They get 10% of what you wanted. You can really see that happen, and that will start so many more projects where you've gone, it's life. You start something sometimes, you're like, it's going to be too hard sometimes. And you're like, this isn't going to be that valuable, so I'm just going to cut it here and focus on something else. But I also think that's interesting where it's going to still require that human in the loop. AI is good at doing what you've told it to do, but it's not necessarily that great yet at coming up with fresh new ideas, innovating and building things, I'd say. You might disagree from what you've seen, but it's still, someone has an idea. That's the human's creativity. Just because they've now managed to storyboard something or build it doesn't mean that was lazy because you've got AI to do it. It's like, it's still your brain. It's still a human having to solve that problem and then build it. So I think it is just really enabling humans to do things at a lot faster pace, which then rolls onto, though, in a corporate setting, as you were saying, like the governance side and the security side around it. Because you were saying earlier, multiple people not talking to each other and trying to solve the same problem in a different way. Where are you seeing businesses successfully govern usage of AI? Because that is, honestly, 90% of the conversations I have with customers at the moment around AI is, we don't even know what people use it. We don't know what they're using it for. We don't even know what they're putting into it.
Yeah.
What's a good way to actually start attacking that problem?
there's so again, these are new problems to solve within organizations because the technology didn't exist before. So I think things like Agent 365, which is landing shortly, will take us a great leap forward in being able to observe, govern, and manage agents.
Okay.
So I think there'll be a great sort of groundswell of customers that see agent use within the organization today and want to have a control plane to manage that, and so they'll look to things like Agent 365. But the technology can only get you so far, and I think you're starting to see certainly the discussion, if not the roles coming through yet, of AI roles within organizations, that are there to manage the agent side of things, and that might start in an IT function, but I can see a world where there are roles within organizations that are managing an AI workforce, in concert with the human workforce. And so because you have to think about things like governance, you have to think about fit, cost management, the onboarding and life cycle of agents, that kind of thing. Once you get to a certain critical mass, you can bet you need to put a person on that potentially. Partners also play a massive role in this, right? So lots of organizations already battle with so many different priorities every single day, dealing with the needs of their end users, dealing with the needs of the customers that they're selling to or buying from, the products that they create, the cybersecurity landscape that they have to manage, the rollout of desktop images that they have to think about, and all, like you can imagine in an IT function, there's so many things they're already having to deal with. I think there's a great opportunity for partners to play in actually bringing scale expertise to helping them solve some of these challenges and helping them manage it as well going forwards. Because actually, if you can take some of that pain away, it frees up those folks whose time is already thinly spread to go and focus on really important things.
Going back to that Agent 365, you said, do you want, what is that bit more detail? And you said it in a way of managing it and governing it.
Yeah, so very simply, Agent 365 seeks to bring a control plane to your agent ecosystem. Okay. So whereas today you might have agents sitting, without ID and without the sort of same easy way to govern and control them, Agent 365 seeks to bring all of that together to bring you, one, as I say, like the cliche, like one pane of glass.
Okay, yeah.
We'll get there, but the idea is that you can bring agents into observability, control and govern and manage them more easily. And as they mature within the organization, that's going to be important because you're going to want to know what's the impact these agents are going to have. So, for example, how do you easily report on the hours, the assisted hours that agents have within my team? If I've got 50 agents, what's that actually doing to me in terms of return on that time? You can map that stuff out. You can put a cost on a task and see how agents are helping. So it's the beginning of that journey into how you manage them more effectively.
So you're able to see all the agents across your business, what they're doing, how they're working, and then how effective they are. That's really good actually, because we were saying earlier about the success metrics, and if you can set that and see Agent X is doing this, Agent Y is doing that, we can scrap Agent Z because that's not actually doing anything. And also it's good, isn't it, because Microsoft, the agents also follow permissions based on the user who's using it. Is that correct? Because so you couldn't just send someone an agent and then all of a sudden I've got access to all the HR data.
Yeah, so you hit upon a really important point with all of this, right? Which is again, this is not always the sort of most attractive part of the journey, but governance and control is really important, because if an agent is acting on your behalf, then it's going to act within your context. So it will have access to the same, data that you have access to, or, the same permissions envelope, if you like, that you have, because it's acting on your behalf. So if you've got more access to something than you should have, so in turn would your agent. And that's okay to a point, because the sort of, I guess, blast radius of how much damage you can do within an organization is limited to what you could already do. But if you start to create agents that are acting autonomously and working across functions and with other agents, then you can imagine you need to assign them identity, you need to assign controls to those agents, you need to make sure that you've got the right governance systems in place and data protection rules in place so that these agents are constrained in the same way that your human employees would be, because you don't want a situation where, and the classic example is, you've connected AI to your HR data, and someone comes along and is able to accidentally pull out how everybody's paid.
Yeah.
Because they've got more access to information than they should have. Like, that's like a really easy bad case example, right? But it's that sort of thing you need to put in place the guardrails to prevent, and then of course you can start to build value on top. And it starts with things like Purview and other services, right? And I think sometimes it can be easy with the desire to move fast and innovate. So we'll get back to that. Whereas actually you should plan that stuff from the outset, because it's in those solid foundations. Then you start to really achieve great things. But
because I suppose that governance layer, and especially the permissions, is probably more important now than ever, because you have some layer of trust from people that if they went, oh, hang on, I've just accidentally accessed all the HR information. Some people would go through and have a look, but some people might be like, actually, I know I shouldn't be able to see this. I'm going to go and report that and be like, by the way, I've just seen this. I haven't had a look. Just remove it and have a look elsewhere. Whereas an agent's not going to think, I probably shouldn't be able to see that. It's going to go, well, that's my permission, so I'm going to use that information. I'm going to spread it. So there is, you're right. Now is probably even more important than ever than making sure that you've really nailed down the governance, especially when people leave jobs, right? Yeah. And they still have their logins. And it's like, you never know what that agent's going to be able to do with that piece of information. So, yeah, that I can see that becoming a problem quite quickly. It's like even the AI Act, the EU AI Act is coming in. It's even things like you can't have AI make a decision based on a person. So it's like HR. It can't go through and be like, don't hire that person because it's got some sort of bias that's put in based on conversations people have had on Teams chat and that sort of stuff. So it is really important to get that right now. And that's still, as you say, it's like a very new thing for companies. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how we do that.
Listen, it's new for technology companies. Yeah. It's new for end users and businesses. It's new for legislators and governments. Like how we tackle some of these things. A lot of it is all new, and there have to be decisions made, and rightly those have to be made by bodies like governments and legislators to say, even though the technology might be able to do a thing, actually we have this opinion that says we should not be using it for this thing. So using AI responsibly is really important, right? Because actually the capabilities, seemingly endless, could be used for inappropriate means. And so we have a strong focus actually as a maker of this technology that we believe it should be used responsibly and ethically. And that's part of any process. When you're designing something, you should be looking at actually is this feasible, is this achievable, is it the right use of the technology, and as part of that kind of qualification of the problem you're trying to solve, you may get to the end of that and go, actually agents are not the right approach. Or actually, maybe it's a combination of an agent plus an automation flow, or we're going to it doesn't always have to be route one straight into agents. We encourage people to do that sort of envisioning piece of just mapping out, like, what are the problems you're trying to solve? What does good look like from the solution? How does AI fit into that? And then there's a sort of set of steps and qualifiers that you've got to think about before you kind of go, oh yeah, all right, let's go do it. One of them was also, to your point about an employee leaving an organization, is life cycle. Who's going to own the work that agents do between individuals? And if you leave or change roles, but what you've created is adding tremendous value, what do you do about that, and how do you structure that? So these are all decisions that, again, partners can help with, but customers have to think about that aren't explicitly solved just by the technology alone.
That's true, because a lot of the time people just throw AI at a problem, whereas a lot of the time it could have just been a simple automation or a little script. I think that's where it's really important to come up with the problem statement of what you're trying to achieve. What are you struggling with at the moment, and what would success look like? And it's probably a high percentage of the time doesn't actually even require some use of AI. It's like, let's just build something a lot with a heavy guardrails that's, when this happens, perform that task. Yeah. People go, oh, that's an AI job. Because I think it's AI seems to be the way that people are trying to automate things now, and people have become a lot more aware that automation is possible.
Yeah.
Now everyone's talking about it because of AI, but there wasn't really that hype of automation. Well, there was a bit, but no one. It wasn't everyone going. We need to automate everything as much as
Yeah.
chuck AI at it. So
I think that's a combination of, like, process automation's been a thing for a long time,
yeah,
right, in various guises. But the difference at the moment, I think, is because people are seeing AI permeate into their personal lives.
yeah,
So they're installing chat agents onto their phones, and they're moving from using search engines to using Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever they might be using, right? And they see that in their personal context, and then they can immediately see that in their work context. And so they start to then think, well, actually, if I'm using it to generate birthday invitations for my
yeah,
kid's party at home, how can I be using it to generate XYZ in a work context? And so then that generates excitement, it generates desire, it also creates the risk of shadow AI and all sorts of bits and pieces. But you're right, actually, there are many things that people jump and go, well, I'm going to use AI to do that. And I say, well, when you think about it, that's pretty deterministic. Like, that's just a very simple set of repeatable steps. Probably should be, Power Automate Flow or something like that, right? And again, that's where doing that analysis to figure out, well, what is the thing that you're trying to do? At what level does it sit within an organization? What are the KPIs that we're going to work against to know whether this is having an impact? And then how do we do the feasibility piece to know, actually, is AI the right solution at all? Or, hey, actually, that mundane set of steps, we're just going to map that out and put it into a flow that runs reliably, consistently, and according to schedule every time. And you might front end that with an agent. It might be that there is an interactive element to it, that actually orchestrates many different automations in a large language model way that means people can interact using natural language. Like, that's valid, but you're not relying on an LLM to do the entire task, because that's not what it's perfect for. There are a tool for every job, right?
Where I haven't pushed Copilot Studio this far yet, but there's a lot of conversations at the moment about multi-agent systems where you kind of have, the project manager, and then you'd give it a task and it will orchestrate other ones and use that.
Yeah.
Where is Copilot Studio with that now? Because I feel like that's still kind of a frontier sort of technology and use with the AI.
Yeah, so you can create multi-agent workflows in Copilot Studio, and obviously, depending on the complexity, we think about like the build versus buy kind of journey. So, where do you use something off the shelf? Where do you use something that is baked in? So maybe you start with something that already exists, like a researcher agent or an analyst agent, and you sort of buy those solutions. And then as you graduate through to maybe something a little bit more complicated, maybe at a higher level within the business, maybe that's something that you could, orchestrate using Copilot Studio. You bring in other connectors, you connect to other agents, other data sources, but you're still managing it largely in that sort of middle ground of, it's customized, but it's still within the off-the-shelf sort of realm. But by the time you get to the thick end of the wedge, you're into things like Foundry, where you're maybe bringing your own models, or you're doing some different kinds of tuning, or you're integrating in different kinds of ways, or you're reaching a level of complexity that Copilot Studio is not the right solution for. And so again, when you're doing that analysis to figure out, like, what is the problem we're trying to solve, that's another axis to think about. It's like, well, actually, could this be solved using Agent Builder?
Yeah.
Or actually, is this something we need to go full Foundry and go all in on and think about multi-model stuff and all the rest of it? Like, and there'll be a sliding scale. Different problems that you're trying to solve will sit at different parts of that journey. And again, we've sort of published different ways to try and help you understand more quickly what are good scenarios for each part of that journey, like what sits in a good, M365 Copilot kind of mode versus what would you think about using Foundry for. So we're trying to make it easier for customers to understand what good looks like, but it will look good. What good looks like will look different for every customer.
So, because there's a lot of pre-built agents as well that you can use from Studio, can't you? Because I went to an event yesterday actually where they were talking about Copilot Studio, how to use it, how to actually start building your own agents. And I asked about one with, could we get it so when you get a supplier quote, you put it in, put 5% on, It'll put it through Business Central automatically, so it's accurate for the finance team. There's less human error. Bang, quote template, FGS branding, send it off. And then I mentioned that, and basically the lady JD was running it was like, oh, this is actually something that Copilot have built already, which you can integrate in. So is there, I'm assuming then there's like a big library of loads of different pre-existing agents which people can look through and deploy?
Yeah, so obviously it's growing all the time in terms of the capabilities. Some of my favorites are things like the researcher agent, for example, which is tuned and configured to be great at doing research and producing really useful results in that mode. But you're starting to see whether you're using a coding agent through GitHub Copilot, or like I say, whether you're using a researcher agent in Microsoft 365 Copilot, you're starting to see these custom agents pop up. But indeed, there's a whole ecosystem out there of people being able to create their own using the SDKs to solve discrete industry challenges or whatever. So I think, again, we're at this sort of early part of the journey where this is all starting to come together. But the notion of marketplaces full of agent skills and connectors and agents themselves across domains is rapidly accelerating, because again, you don't need everybody to reinvent the wheel. Actually, there'll be common business processes like the one you just identified there, right, which might sit in Sales Copilot or whatever, because it's a very common task, and you might want to just tune the last 80, 90, the last 10, 20%, sorry, but 80 to 90% of it is repeatable because they're common business tasks. So yeah, the researcher agent, I would encourage you to, if you've not used it, it's really, really cool.
So explain that a bit more. You could just get it to research a topic and it'll
Yeah,
basically do that.
Basically, yeah. So you sort of give it. I mean, obviously, it's all about context. So
Yeah.
the more context you can give, the kind of better the result will be. But it's essentially your research assistant. If you want to understand the trends affecting a customer in a given industry, you can give it the customer context. You can say, hey, look, I'm working with this organization. I'm thinking about these things. I want to understand more about this and that challenge. Help me with some research. This is what I want the output to look like. There's a sort of skill in itself to sort of prompting the agent, and it will go off and do the research, and it will guide you through, and it'll maybe ask you some qualifying questions. What do you want the output to look like? You're talking short or long form, that kind of thing. Off you go. I'll let you know when I'm done. And then after a few minutes, sometimes a couple, depending on what you've asked it to do, sometimes longer, you will have this really thoroughly grounded, cited research report on the thing that you've asked for. And for me, this is truly powerful because, if I'm thinking about a customer I'm going to go and see, and I want to know all about the latest that's affecting them, I'm going to go and use the researcher agent to help me prep for that, so that I know the right sort of notes to hit that are going to aid me in my conversation. Or if I'm thinking about a conversation I want to have with a partner about a solution I want them to build, I'm going to go and research the market that solution sits in. I'm not going to go and do all of that research myself. The research agent is going to help me get 90% of the way there, and then I'm going to use that basis to then go and do the last mile of stuff that I want to really know about. So it's very, very powerful.
And that massively speeds up those conversations because you're cutting out that discovery phase to some degree. Obviously, you still have to ask the questions because the research you've got, you need to contextualize to them. But it does speed up that point. You've gone in, right, we're all on the same page here. Let's just do that final bit of fine tuning so we all understand what we're trying to achieve, and then work from there. Yeah, I need to have a proper look into that because I was very impressed actually how simple it was to use this studio. You just connect it, what channel you want it. Do you want people to interact it through Teams, WhatsApp, Slack, whatever? Connect it to different tools. And you literally, well, I did it before where I just went onto ChatGPT and was like, can you just give me a good system prompt to put into the studio? It comes out with this really nice long prompt. You amend it. I'll make sure it sources the stuff and then puts it in. And I was really quickly, in about 5 minutes, starting to create my first agent, and was very impressed with how simple it is to use.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because a lot of people think, oh, agent, I don't even really know what that means. I'm a bit scared of even having a look at it. But just logging into it, and it's like step by step, I'll just tell me what you want to build, bang.
That's
done.
the most powerful piece, right? Like, I think if you're more technical, there is a temptation to go, just show me the back end. I want to go build this and hook it all up the way I want, and I want to see all the bells, whistles, and knobs and dials, and I want to play with all of that. But actually, the first thing you're presented with is, hey, use Copilot to help you here. Like, describe what you're trying to do. And I think that seems a little bit daunting sometimes, because your first thought is, I've got to type the thing that I want, and then, like you say, you could always go to another AI or another source and help you develop a prompt. But actually, speak into it. That's the coolest thing.
Voice.
Use voice.
Yeah.
Speak in what you want to have happen, because actually, we're like, people can be excellent typists, but they still leave out a lot of context. Whereas actually, if you just describe using your natural language the thing you're trying to do and speak that into the prompt, you'll actually get way better result than you think, because you're not going to leave out the extra context. And actually, the AI is really good at understanding what you're trying to say. Whereas if you try and like type this perfectly finessed prompt, you'll always leave out something. So whether you're in Copilot Studio or just in general, speaking into AI, it feels a bit weird. Like, obviously on an open office floor, not everyone's going to be doing that. But genuinely, like, that actually, like, if I'm working with let's say I'm working with GitHub Copilot, I can more quickly and more deeply plan and develop outcomes by speaking in than I can typing. So,
to be fair, whenever I've had to make presentations for things, that's where I've talked, because sometimes you find you need to just ramble.
Yeah.
And then when you start talking, your brain thinks of something else. Oh, yeah, what about that as well? And you worry a bit sometimes. You're like, oh, is it going to go on a bit of a tangent? But you're right. It is really good at going, right, that there was an and an R there and all that. Like, that's probably not as important, but it will really wrap it in.
Yeah.
Make really accurate results. The quality of output that we've had, just as you're saying, like last 6 months, from where it was 6 months ago, a year ago, to now, is phenomenal. I remember when it was like just after COVID time, we'd gone back into the office and we were all showing each other the stuff we were asking ChatGPT at the time, and we were all getting excited. This is so powerful. It's strong. To where we're getting it now is unbelievable. It's the example of when people were making videos for the first time, and it was like someone getting Will Smith to eat some spaghetti, and his face was like melting into the spaghetti, and he had 10 fingers and all that in each hand. And now it's like you can't even tell the difference. And that is in a very short space of time.
This is what I mean. Like, people look at those moments and go, oh, it'll never do X. You know, look at the quality of that picture that's been generated. Like, the classic one is they can't even get the hands right. I mean, that's yesterday's problem.
It does now.
It does now.
Yeah.
Oh boy, does it. And now the ball moves forward. Something I like doing, which I'm still outside of my comfort zone in doing this, but actually it's really powerful, is if I'm on site with a partner and I'm driving home, is voice noting myself, just decompressing, like dumping all of my top of mind into a voice note, so that I'm getting it fresh as I'm driving, because I'm sat on the M25. What else am I doing? I'm just speaking into the ether, just getting it all out, all the ideas, just getting it all out, transcribing the voice note, and then getting my AI to make sense of it and help me work through my thoughts, help me create the right tasks for the next day, or help me synthesize ideas or spot things that I'd not noticed, because over time it's building up context about me. So, knows meetings I've had with different stakeholders. And so if I'm ideating about something, it will help me reason and go, hey, you've been speaking with Bob about this, maybe you should go and do something else and think about this differently. So just that decompression, that hour in the car or whatever I'm doing, spitballing ideas, like I can't wait for the day that I don't have to sort of manually link all of that together.
Yeah, it just does it.
It just does. I'm sat there in a CarPlay, just hit a button and go kind of thing. And we're not far away from that, I don't think. But that's really powerful, because again, I'm not having to like think about writing a journal. I'm not having to distill my thoughts and then write them down. I'm just going. Like, here's an hours of unfiltered audio. You go and help me make sense of this.
Well, it makes that in a tech world, like lossless, because you've gone and got all of your ideas. You'd had a whole day with a customer, a partner, whatever, and you've probably sent 90% of what you've spoke about. You've just brain dumped into this tool. It's transcribed it and you've got it. Whereas if you're going, right, I've got to write the notes down on paper, you're probably going down to like 20 to 30% of what you've done. So you'll forget half of that. You know, you can't remember everything, otherwise our brains would fry.
Yeah.
So it is keeping that context of what we're doing in our work and in our life a lot more accurate to what we're actually talking about, instead of losing this bandwidth from I've now got to change it. And then once you've then got to then communicate that with someone else, you're going to lose a little bit more there. So by the end, you've met a customer, you've gone and spoke to someone else, and they're only getting 5-10% of the picture.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've managed to put all of it in, that's so helpful.
Yeah.
Because then they're getting, even if they just get 50% of what you've spoke about, how beneficial is that?
And that context builds over time and it compounds in its value. Like, I'll give you a real example. So yesterday I was IMing back and forth with someone that I work with at a partner, and he'd asked me, because I've been on vacation, he'd asked me, hey, I sent you an email while you were out, you know, have you had a chance to look at it yet? And I'm like, I don't think I've seen this email. I'm like, my inbox is on fire, like it's overflowing, and I completely missed it. I was like, I could use Outlook search to try and find the email and then try and think about where this fits into the thread and try and piece this all together. But I was like, I'm just going to go over here, and I had a terminal window open. I'm a big fan of GitHub Copilot. I have the Work IQ CLI connected in. So I just chatted away and was like, hey, did so-and-so send me an email last week about this topic? What did they ask for? And it went away, used Work IQ, searched through my mailbox, found the mail, knows who the stakeholder was because we have built context through meeting notes and other interactions. And so not only could it reason over the email and go, oh, he's asking for X, Y, and Z, but it could provide a ton of other context about the interactions we've had that meant that it, you know, and it gave me like a paragraph of really context relevant information about the stakeholder and the ask. And I was able to go back to them with an answer super quick, in a much quicker way than if I had gone into Outlook, used search, found the email, then had to trawl through the thread of the email, figure out what the ask was, look back through notes to try and think, oh, when did I last meet this person? What was the last thing we talked about? Didn't have to do any of that. I could just say, what's this all about? And then the agent went off and did all of that research effectively, pulling all that content together and gave me the answer. I even screenshotted it to him. And I was like, AI's just helped me with this. Sent him a screenshot. I was like, look, there we go. And he was really impressed with it. But it's those moments, those aha moments of like, oh, actually, the more information that I give it, the more helpful it can be to me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that context window in our lives is just massively growing. And that's also good of the fact if someone leaves and then it's like, right, someone go into their inbox, see what they're doing. Instead of someone going scrolling through all of these different trails, it's like, right, tell me what they've been up to. Where are they with this? Blah, blah, blah. And you can very quickly get someone else up to date with that information, which makes it so much easier to collaborate as a team when you've all got this mass load of context. And even if two people are talking and it'll go, even though they don't communicate every day or they're different businesses, it will see the context and be like, oh, we saw this problem before in this business. This is how we solved it. We can apply that to this current customer. So it is, I think it is massively, that building out that context window is so important for businesses and really valuable. Well, that's like why social media companies collect so much data on people, because then they can, it's not great how they use it a lot of the time to get you obsessed with it, but it's like, it's built enough context that they're actually able to achieve their goal of trying to get people on it more. And if we can do that as businesses and go, right, this is my business, we help customers do X, Y, Z. If we can keep the context of the whole industry, what's going on, and in our current customer base, we can provide such a stronger outcome for our customers. I do think it will be the businesses that really embrace using it that will do really well at the moment.
Yeah, on a personal productivity level, I use it every day. Like I have a terminal window open constantly, and it's connected to my notes, it's connected to my Work IQ, it's connected to lots of different things. And now if I'm going to go and meet with someone, I can just say, hey, like prep me for this meeting with blah blah blah. It will then go and look through all of my notes, look through all of my interactions, look through all the projects that are open, and it'll write me a briefing doc. So I go into that meeting and it's like, oh, last time you met, you talked about these things. These are the open actions. Here's where we're at with this. Like here's something that you know about this person that is relevant to the conversation. It builds this picture over time by using all of these notes that I capture, the calls that I transcribe, or and it is like having an assistant there all the time giving me the best information possible. Now, it's not always perfect. If something's mistranscribed, I sometimes have to correct it, or if there's an unusual name spelling, I have to tell it how to spell that correctly. But it creates memories. It learns as we go. And crucially, it learns things like my style, my writing style. So I fed it all the blog posts I've ever written and the emails I've written. So it's like it's synthesized a style guide for my writing so that now, in fact, just again, another real example, I was working with an organization. They'd asked me to review some content. I reviewed it. I then gave it to a colleague. They reviewed it. We came up to similar conclusions. I then gave it to the AI for a review as well, and it came to similar conclusions. So I had sort of 3 sets of opinion, and I needed to distill this into an email I could write back to the person, summarizing it all. So again, I could just use Copilot to look at the AI output for the analysis and the inputs that me and my colleague had put in. I was like, hey, just help me draft out an email back to this person, kind of bringing all of this together, essentially. And it was like, cool, yep, I'm going to go look across all of these things. I'm going to pull in your style guide so I know the kind of way that you write, the things that you like to say, or the way you like to phrase things. And then it's got a skill that allows it to create an Outlook draft. So rather than kind of popping something into the window for me to copy and paste, it fires up Outlook in the background, pops it into a draft for me. I mean, magic. I can then read through the draft, couple of little tweaks here and there, pop in the who and to, hit send, done. Now, I'm still doing the last mile. Like I still did I had to read the document myself because I wanted to, and I had to form an opinion, and I still socialized it with colleagues and still did all it, but like summarizing all of that, whereas it might take me ages of agonizing going, what about this sentence? How do I represent that? Do 20 seconds, done. Sent it back to my colleague. Hey, here's the draft. What do you think? Yeah, love it. Sent. Like, so tasks that would have taken me hours maybe now take me moments and allow me to move on to focus on the next thing while still providing really, really high quality.
Yes.
Like my bar for my role is really, really high. Like I don't buy into like AI slop or anything like that. I don't want to just like farm my job out to have it write my stuff for me. But the fact that it can now assist me to be more effective, like I love that.
And that's great on the, it's got your style down as well.
Yeah.
Because someone will send me an email that's so clearly written with AI. It's like, it spoke exactly the same as everyone else who's just sent an email. It's got those M dashes in. You're like, come on now. That's interesting that it's getting your style well as well. Obviously, you've got to go back and like personalize it as well. But then also having that really quality output with all of the key points you have to hit. And it sounds like then you can do the final mile. You're not just outsourcing your brain to it either. You're still thinking. You're still using it to actually.
I challenge it all the time.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I think there's a temptation, like I said, just to farm it out to the AI.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. Like the most power is when because it's essentially a mirror, right? Like, and it will feed back to you what you put into it. So I get it to ask me questions back. Mm-hmm. Don't just go and do the thing. Challenge me. Ask me for more clarity until you get the answer the clarity that you need. Or like sometimes if I'm thinking about a plan, like if we're ideating and coming up with a plan, I'll then do like a rubber duck review using a different model to go and validate the plan. Where are the gaps here? And really, the more time you spend going through that sort of challenging phase back and forth, the better the outcome will be. Whereas if you just kind of like one shot it, hey, go do me this thing, YOLO mode, off you go.
That'll do.
Like, you'll get some kind of answer, but it won't be perfect.
I find getting it to ask me questions, that's really powerful because it will even ask questions that you haven't really thought about. It'll be, actually that does give you a lot more context. It forces you to give it more context, and context is obviously the key point to getting good quality output.
All these things are, like all these large language models are really good, like statistical guessing engines. Like they know, like with no context at all, if you say it's a beautiful day outside, let's go to the, it's going to say beach.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's going to say beach. It has no other context than what other one it's been trained on. Statistically, the next most likely word in that sentence is going to be beach because it has nothing else to go on. But if you feed it information, your habits, where you live, what you like, what you do, it's a beautiful day. Let's go to the, it might then say museum, park, zoo, airport, whatever it might be, because you'll have given it more context than just off the bat. And that's the thing, like being able to connect it to your company data, being able to connect it to your notes, being able to connect it to your context, the more likely it is to be able to give you the high quality answers and assistance that you need. And that's where the true power comes in. Being able to go like, hey, there are 3 documents in my OneDrive, like help me pull them together into a slide that I can present to my leadership team. And it knows who my leadership team is because it knows it has access to Work IQ and the graph, so it knows who those people are likely to be. It has access to my calendar, so it knows who's likely, like when this meeting is likely to be, who's likely to be in attendance. It's got the documents. It knows how to use, without any of those things, I would just be back and forthing with essentially a chatbot and getting not very far.
That is where you said it's like a mirror. It really is then, isn't it? Because it'll be different for everyone. If everyone gave it all the proper amount of context about you, you're not going to be just given the same answers to everything. It'll be like, Ted does this, Ted knows about that, James knows this, James knows about that. And we're still bringing in our individual value. We're not just as like outsourcing everything and just going, AI, do that for me. It's do it for me how I would do that. And then it can actually complement my strengths at the moment.
Right.
I think that's, yeah. It is really exciting.
Super powerful stuff.
Yeah. So last point before we finish up, I think if you could give any advice to someone who might be a bit scared to even start using it, they might just use the free version of something and just use it as Google. What is a good way to just get rid of that fear and just start using it and start using that learning journey?
I mean, you've answered the question there. Right? Start by starting. Mm-hmm. Pick a simple task that is often repeated and see about how you can start to pull it apart. You don't even have to necessarily jump straight to the solution. Just grab a whiteboard or a piece of paper, map out what does this problem look like? Who does this problem affect? What are the steps involved in solving this problem? Where might AI play a role in that? What does the outcome? How will we measure the outcome? Just start to ideate on the problem. And then once you have a picture of kind of what the thing is that you want to solve, then you use Copilot to challenge you over what your plan is. Like, hey, I'm thinking about solving this thing. Like, walk me through, like, challenge me on my thinking, and then start to have a little play. See what you can achieve. I think that don't go too big too quick. Start, as I say, figure out those units of value across the organization, and then solve meaningful problem challenges. I'm not talking about the personal productivity stuff, like I want an agent to manage my calendar. I'm talking about like the real impactful, multidisciplinary business. Like, just start by solving a couple of, prioritized problems, or find solutions you're not going to solve. That's equally as powerful as going, these are the things we're not going to get to just now. But I think just spending a little bit of time in that discovery phase really sets you up for success later on. But yeah, getting hands-on. I'm a very hands-on learner, so I like to play
around, give it a go, break it, fix it, see how it goes.
Yeah.
James, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.